Proverbs 2:18. Ki shacha el mavet beta, ve'el Rephaim ma'aglotecha. So here in verse 18, we begin with a key. Now I take this to be a ground key, so we get something like 4, and then this is where the verse gets tricky. So if you go look this one up in commentaries, you're going to see a variety of things. In English translations, most of them take beta as the subject. However, we want to ask whether that actually is the case, because notice the verb that we have here is a third feminine singular. The verbal root of the verb is shoch, to sink down, and as a tu vav yod, or a hollow verb, what we end up with is the vav is gone, and we get the a vowel here in the first root letter. Now, the accent matters here because in these tu vav yod verbs, an accented R1 is the perfect, and an accented R2 equals the participle. And so we're not using a participle here. This is, in fact, the perfect with the accented R1. So perfect third feminine singular, and house is not feminine singular. So I don't think that house can be the subject. This would read something like, for her house sinks down to death. Now that makes a lot of sense, but syntactically it's a little bit awkward to try to bring house up to be this third feminine singular subject. So I want to propose something like this. For she sinks down to death, and then this is what Steinman proposes, which is, and he takes her house to be appositional. So death is her house. Now I think that's a little bit awkward as well, but it does follow at least the awkward syntax here. And she sinks down to death, which is her house. Now, the thing here would be that the warning to the son is if you follow her, then she sinks down to death, which is her abode. And if you follow her to that abode, then you will be sinking down to death as well. So I think it's a pretty strong warning here if we read it like that. Let me erase some of this, and then we'll look at another option here. I don't know how much I want to erase. Let's do this, and then I can draw some more lines. Yeah, let's keep going. Let's keep erasing. How about that? Now, I can't get all those little dots off of there. That's all right. So here we go. So now let's read it like this. Let's re-highlight that one just for consistency. So for, she sinks down to, and then we get something like the death of her house if we read this conjunctive accent joining these two together. Now, it's not impossible, depending on how these accents need to fall, it's not impossible that you could get a conjunctive accent here, but still not have the construct package. However, I'm thinking in terms of this construct accent, and this would be something like she sinks down to the death of her house, meaning this is the death that her house now experiences because she has forsaken the companion of her youth and has forgotten the covenant of her God. In other words, when she flits around and destroys this marriage, it warrants the death of her house. So all that to say, read up on this, check into it a little bit more. Proverbs 2:18. There's a variety of ways that you can interpret and handle this awkward syntax, but I wanted to show you a couple of those. And since we have time to talk about these on weekend editions, there you go. At the end of the day, we've got she sinks down to the death of her house. Next, in the next line, we get and to the dead, and this is the dead more generically. The dead ones, I think the dead spirits is what Halot uses here, so we could even write that out to dead spirits. You might also see in the ESV, I think you get a note that says the Rephaim, just taking this as a proper name, but to the dead spirits. And then here we have a verbless clause, are her wagon tracks or her paths, her ways. But again, notice here's that word wagon tracks. So you might remember that wagon tracks can be used as the ways of righteousness or that sort of thing, this kind of way of wisdom, this deeply rooted path that wisdom takes you on. Well, if you start following the strange woman or Lady Folly, so to speak, then her deeply rooted paths will take you straight to the dead spirits that have fled to Sheol. So the whole picture here is of death. The picture here is of this little bit of folly is going to lead you to death. But if you remember the structuring in 16, wisdom, understanding, and discretion will guard you from this death and from being led along the wagon tracks of the dead spirits.